Hey everyone, it's Martin Sibley here with Matthew Newbury, and we're going to be having a chat today about accessible housing, but also just about what Matthew's been up to since we first met him about 5 years ago now, I believe, Matthew.
5 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, time's flying, eh?
Certainly has.
So yeah, we'll get cracking. I think the first question really was, I guess just to sort of remind everyone, or for those that didn't see the article before, a bit about your backstory really. So I guess where you grew up, but particularly how you became to have a disability and any of the sort of factors around, you know, coming to terms with that as well.
I grew up in Norfolk, in a town called Attleborough, just south of Norwich, and had a road accident when I was 15, where I lost my left leg above the knee, and suffered other injuries. And that was the sort of, that was obviously, you know, the moment at which I became disabled. Yeah, that was basically what happened to me.
Was there, I mean, obviously, I imagine there was a little bit of kind of the physical, obviously recovery, but I'm more thinking about you having a aesthetic leg, is it right?
Prosthetic, yeah.
Thank you.
I had a prosthetic leg pretty quickly after this happened to me, because I was very keen to get up and about and get moving and get back to what I knew as normal, because, you know, an incident like that, more so than a congenital disability, you know, is a sudden change. You know, immediately you're thrust into this world that you sort of know nothing about, and it was getting on for 20 years ago, and 20 years ago things were very different in terms of the amount of media coverage and knowledge, general knowledge that people, you know, the wider community have of people with disabilities. It sort of feels like now, you know, you can't really put the telly on without seeing somebody with one leg and a pair of shorts. Yeah. Whereas at the time I lost my leg, it was completely brand new territory for me.
We'll touch upon some of the sort of psychological, and when I suppose I'm thinking psychological, I actually think it's more about some of the societal views of disability.
Sure.
And we can expand that out beyond your own experience. But in terms of actually, how long would you say it took from the accident to be fully mobile again?
Well, I got my first prosthetic leg about a year after the incident, and it was a fairly primitive prosthetic leg, and at the time I was suffering from sort of skin problems and limb fitting problems and all the sort of other type of problems that the amputees have, and being sort of 16, 17 and wanting to kind of get out there and you know, do what 16, 17-year-olds do, I sort of meant that I was kind of wearing it for longer than I should have done and all this. So it probably took me slightly longer than might have ordinarily been the case to get fully stable. And since then, I've been very lucky. I haven't had any elongated periods of time where I haven't been able to wear it. I walk relatively well. My biggest problem is my right leg, my remaining leg, and to be honest with you, compared to, you know, the other amputees that I know, I'm actually pretty lucky in terms of, you know, the way that I can move about and what I can do. So.
Yeah. And then also when we met about 5 years ago, it was off the back of being on the Secret Millionaire program.
Yeah.
So I suppose that there was the element that you had the accident, you had to deal with some of the, you know, getting the prosthetic leg sorted and fitted and comfortable and some of the psychological things. But then you basically cracked on with life and just got going and being independent and all the rest of it. So what was the bridge from that sort of world to then, you know, wanting and reaching out to help someone else and being on that Channel 4 programme?
I think there's two or three different questions there, and I think Secret Millionaire was a sort of surreal experience, which initially came about through Channel 4 approaching me and you know, for in fact approaching me 3 years in a row to do it, for the first 2 years having not kind of realised that as well as ticking one of the boxes, I also had a disability. My insistence that I wanted to work with people with disabilities wasn't for a sort of whimsical reason. It was because I felt like that was something I could relate to, and it took them a while to kind of cotton on to that. I think getting independent was, in the nicest possible way, forced upon me, because I was very independent as a child. I had my own stuff going on as a kid. I had part-time jobs, and I had a very clear kind of vision of what I wanted to do for a career, which was actually theatre, lighting, and design. Yeah, okay. And that's absolutely what I wanted to do as a child. And my mother and father were absolutely determined that, despite the injuries that I sustained as a result of that accident, that they would, work out a way of me leading an independent life. Yeah. And that was initially why I moved to London. And I moved to London having grown up in Norfolk, and to a certain extent had a similar but different experience to everybody else who moves to a big city and deals with all the things that come with living in a big city rather than living in the countryside. Yeah. So it was just different for me, but not in every way, sort of similar.
Sure. So that's interesting. Yeah, it's not an obvious statement to make, but I think that what you went through with the accident must have then led to wanting to give some support and raise awareness for the disability movement. Yeah. Because you had that very personal experience.
Well, what I had was almost unanimous support from the moment I had my accident. Literally from the very second that I'm lying on the road to today. Yeah. I have had, people of all shapes and sizes supporting me doing what I'm doing. Yeah. So when we talk about, being able to go and do Secret Millionaire, whether it's because I had the wherewithal to do it or I had the money to do it, both of those things are because other people helped and supported me to get to that position. Yeah. My business, which builds houses and develops land, is only possible because of the kind of help and support that I have of a massive group of people, staff, investors, all sorts of people. So the whole thing is a sort of team effort, and I don't think what it has sort of hit home to me really is that everything is a team effort, isn't it? And actually, if I can do a little something to help people in a way that I understand, then that just contributes towards everybody else's journey, because nobody in our situation, or any situation actually, gets where they want to get to without support and help from other people, I guess.
Sure. So before we move on to really good answers, I like that. Before we move on to the bigger sort of discussion on housing, a couple of clarifications. So with the Secret Millionaire, what, just for those that haven't seen the episode, what did you do on the show for the person?
Went to Manchester, stayed in a house in Moston in Manchester for what turned out to be a fortnight, was meant to be a week. Worked with two charitable organisations, one of which undertake high wire activities for people with disabilities, but also kids from disadvantaged backgrounds, young offenders, that kind of thing. Another group, which is an amateur theatre company, who again work with a lot of kids from socially deprived backgrounds, which Manchester has a lot of. And finally with a lad called Alex Williams, who sadly passed away in 2012, immediately after we had refurbished his house and put through floor lifting and what have you for the purposes of trying to help him have somewhat of an independent life at home. So a great, rewarding, fantastic experience, tinged with sadness because of what happened to Alex, and put a lot of things in perspective for me, and altogether an amazing thing to have been part of.
Yeah, it sounds like a very almost surreal experience. There was so much good.
Well, it was surreal. It was. It rocked me for a number of years, frankly, after Alex died, because I was massively lucky in as much as, the accident that I had was very easy to say, this is your fault, Mr. Lorry driver, or this is your fault, Mr. Land Rover driver. And very easy also to say it wasn't my fault because I was pillion, I was sitting there. So therefore, we went through the process of lawyers and compensation and all of this stuff, and financially set myself up for life. My mother financially set me up for life. And not a lot of people are, or not everybody's that lucky. The situation with Alex was that he had meningitis, and therefore there's no lawsuit, there's nobody to sue. So Alex's parents are, in a position where they were kind of, working night and day to support the family, with Alex with significant needs. So I helped to facilitate Alex's house being adapted, and that wasn't it wasn't an I, that was a big we as well, because we had teams of people up there.
Sure, yeah.
And we put Alex in a position where you could see that he was just going to then fly. You could just it was just very clear that he would have just flown. So as much as it's great to have been able to do that, obviously it's heartbreaking that he didn't make it to actually be able to achieve his potential.
Yeah, so. That's still a very special moment, isn't it?
Yeah. It was an amazing thing to be a part of. That's for sure.
Sure. Okay, so the other area I was going to kind of clarify for the viewers was around the millionaire part.
Yes.
You've sort of touched upon it, I think, already, but you obviously got some money from the payout from a very horrible accident that changed your life, but nonetheless that led to you being able to be financially independent.
Yeah.
And then in the longer run, you ended up running your own business that is all around housing development, right?
Correct, yeah. That's
and
exactly
then
right.
Is a lot of that around disability, or is that...
No, I don't. No, not a lot of it, because it's difficult to build a business of that scale around a relatively narrow or small sector. So what we do primarily is commercial development. That is, build houses on bits of land. The link with people with disabilities is that rather than kind of run away or try to get out of our obligation to provide affordable housing for the purposes of the local authority rent or local authority sale, what we try to do is identify within an area that we're building a number of people that perhaps could benefit from a house which has been adapted, and try to get the local authorities to work with us to allow us to kind of directly talk to those people, find out what it is they need, and actually build it for them as part of our affordable housing offering.
Which sounds like an absolutely win-win-win, because you're running a business that is about developing houses.
Sure.
There's a group of people that there's a short supply. I'm sure a lot of the viewers will echo that there is not enough supply of accessible housing.
No.
And then the local government or local councils and the big government, they are trying to help move things in the right direction, but their job isn't to actually run all the businesses and all the industries.
No.
It's to help the supply and demand come together. And so what you're talking about at the moment on a smaller scale sounds like a really good potential model.
I don't think I've come, in fact I definitely haven't come across a single person inside a housing association, inside local government, inside a council, town council or such like, that has anything other than the best of intentions. I haven't come across a single person, because people people's approach to people with disabilities is almost unanimously to try and help. I haven't inside or outside of business, I haven't come across anybody with a different attitude. So that's the first thing to say. However, trying to get anything done inside a local authority where you have Department A, Department B, Department C, Department D, all of which are underfunded, understaffed, and under pressure, is nigh on impossible. Now, there is also, I believe, a perception on the part of certain, certain parts. Just let me start that again. That there is a perception in the wider community that delivering adapted housing for people with disabilities is difficult, and in reality, I don't think it is. So the blockage is, unfortunately, the red tape within the local authorities. Now, I have been able, in some small way, because what we do is not, world changing, but it's, it's a start.
But it is for the people you have.
Well, I'm sure it is. Yeah. Hopefully, it is. Yeah. We are able to short circuit the process because I have a certain bona fide, because I come from the disabled community. So therefore, the people who are otherwise unable to kind of penetrate and do what they want to do because they can't fully get their head around it because they're not in it, I can say, well, actually, this is what we need to do, and why don't I speak directly to your applicant, and they, so far have allowed that to happen, and we're able to kind of, we're about to build a number of units, all of which will be working directly with people who are going to be living in them, at which point I can say to them, well, actually, if you want the light switch there, because that's where you sit, then that doesn't really cost any more than putting it over there where you can't reach it, for example. So I think, fingers crossed, it could all work quite well.
Sure, that sounds really good. I know we're going to be, people watching are welcome to join our new D Horizons tribe, where we're going to be doing your top tips. So we'll talk a bit more about that at the very end, how we can get involved with that. But I think for this video we're doing that's going out more publicly, it'd be great just to close on your sort of thought. Well, I guess there's two questions. One is, what are the biggest barriers within the physical environment of a home? So we talked about the bureaucracy of the local council sometimes, but just the actual sort of barriers and solutions that you've seen when trying to help people in this situation, and then obviously look at some final thoughts really on what you want to raise awareness on for developers and local authorities and disabled people.
I think there's a one size fits all approach which has to be taken by local government, because otherwise you'd need legions of people assessing every case in forensic detail. But that one size fits all approach just does not work. Right. There are regulations that you have to follow in order to build, what they term as a wheelchair bungalow. You could quite easily be building that bungalow for somebody like me who isn't in a wheelchair, or you could be building that bungalow for somebody with a sensory disability who equally isn't in a wheelchair. So there is a sort of misnomer that one size fits all, and while I understand why it's there, it does make it difficult to get stuff done. That's
every individual person.
Yeah, I mean, but maybe it's just because I sort of spend a reasonable amount of time dealing with it and thinking about it anyway. It kind of comes naturally to me. But we are, for instance, building a bungalow in Norfolk for a couple, both of whom have got reasonably significant disabilities. One of them is in a wheelchair full time, the other one's in a wheelchair part time, and a lot of what we're going to be doing with that unit isn't going to tick the boxes in the book, but is absolutely going to work for their needs. So the biggest thing is about facilitating conversation such that those changes and rules could be bent and people can have things that actually work for them, rather than something that just ticks the box.
So it sounds like the problem, there isn't a sort of universal problem. Everyone has different needs from both their disability but also their personality and their lifestyle, their preferences.
Absolutely. Some of the people that we've worked with are completely relaxed about, if they, for instance, need a hoist, or they need a wash dry toilet, or they need shower seats or whatever adaptations they need, grab rails. They're totally relaxed about, their home having this stuff visible. Other people, usually younger people, are because I was the same, just terrified about this sort of, you're going to end up living in a hospital. Absolutely. You don't want, just because you've got a disability, to sort of, have these damn bumpy white tiles that they insist you put in. And it's sort of, and I've had a couple of situations where I've put them in and I've had to then go out retrospectively and take them down and put something else in, because that's what we've done.
Needed, right?
What they wanted. It's just because they're in a situation, with their disability, they don't necessarily want to have a bathroom that looks like a hospital. So I guess it's I think the most important thing that must be understood is that that there isn't any lack of willingness to help and support within local government, within housing associations, or probably with developers. It's just not. It's just people think it's a much bigger thing than it is. It's not.
So if anyone's watching from those types of organisations, what would you say to them? What sort of, not even advice, but just what would you want to raise awareness to them about?
I think getting stuff done when you build a house is considerably cheaper. There are situations in the regions in which I operate where, because of there's a thing, as I'm sure you're aware, called a disability facilities grant, where you can tap into a fund of money and the government will give you some money to adapt a house. They can't do that until you live or are a tenant in that house. So what that effectively means in practice is that the local authority, albeit through a housing association or other mechanism, pay me to build a house, at which point they pay somebody else to take it to bits and put it back together again, and it just at a cost of double. So it strikes me that there needs to be some thought given to actually building these things for people that who they are, and at which point it's much cheaper because you're doing it at the time of building, because moving the light switch from there to there doesn't cost anything. It just means you put the cable there, not there, when you build the house in the first place. Whereas you try and do it now, then it's difficult, So, so I think just not being worried about thinking a bit outside the box with it. It's kind of an obvious thing to say, but I think sometimes at local government level, the staff can only follow what the book says, and I think they must be empowered to kind of perhaps think outside the box to find some solutions.
A bit more innovative.
Yeah.
Cool. So while we wrap up, what's the future holding for you? I mean, I think you mentioned the sort of corporate social responsibility side with bringing some of this into the business more. What are you planning in the future?
Well, the business is getting bigger, and the business is employing more people every day, it feels like. We are launching into building stuff ourselves as opposed to subbing stuff out to contractors for a variety of reasons, least of all so that we control everything in-house. And what I want to do next is sort of put on paper a policy which ensures that where we have an obligation to build one unit for people with disabilities, we double that provision. Where we have an obligation, where we don't have an obligation to build any for people with disabilities, we do at least one. And where we build units for people with disabilities as part of our affordable housing, we try to identify a tenant and say to them, look, actually, what is it that you need? Forget what the book says or guidelines say,
not legislation driven,
just tell us what it is you need, and then I will go to bat with the local authority if need be and say, look, actually this is what this person needs. I've got a relative authority on it because I'm in the same sector, and try to just kind of get through that way, and that's never been met with anything other than support from the local authorities. It's not, it's never been a battle. It's just a case of sometimes having to sort of persist in getting the message across. Absolutely, sure.
So I'd say it's a real breath of fresh air to hear all that. I think a lot of people watching will agree that it's in a way it's not rocket science, it's just common sense and a bit of innovative thinking, but so few people are doing it. So
I think people are terrified of it. I think things have changed so much since we met. Like I said earlier in the interview, you can't really put the telly on without seeing disability in one form or another, which is ultimately a good thing, and therefore it kind of normalises it. But there still is a kind of, people are on eggshells about it because they don't want to offend, or they don't want to do something wrong, or they don't want to say the wrong thing, and it doesn't come from a bad place. No. It's just people just don't know what to. People don't know what to say, what to do.
Well, it's good to catch up.
Yeah, likewise.
Thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
And, for everyone watching, we'll be doing the top 5 or maybe even more, depending on how we go. Tips from Matthew on accessible housing. So sign up for the D Horizons tribe, and we'll look forward to seeing you there later in the week.